when I would ask people that I've had on this show and the other show that I do, the Fifth Column, why the singular obsession with Israel? The response was always a very practiced response. And, again, this is the Chomsky response because he used to say the same thing. It's like, well, my taxpayer dollars are going, we are intertwined with the Israeli government, et cetera. And then I lived in Sweden for many, many years. And that is a country that is completely obsessed with Israel. If you look at the media in Sweden, and this is, by the way, before waves of immigration, which can explain some of it, you would see every single day, a member of the Knesset sneezed in a way that they found suspect. It would be the headline story. So why are they so obsessed with Israel? And it's not Iran. I mean, the media across Western Europe is singularly focused and obsessed on Israel. And I want to pivot to something
Right.
on
Britain, France, it's all the same story.
100%.
So,
It's
so
everywhere you go.
American, right. And by the way, it was there in the 60s
Mhm.
before America started really spending anything and giving anything to the Israelis.
Yeah.
That's not the reason. That's now the excuse. But the reason really should be understood because I think it's deep. I don't know if you want to get into what that reason is, but it's kind of like it's complex, it's deep, but maybe it's for a
Well,
different.
I'll say this. I can ask you about that because it actually rolls into another question I want to ask you. I mean, I think that if you look at the Europeans in the 60s and 70s, it was a little easier when all of the groups opposing Israel were essentially Marxist in nature, the PFLP and George Habash and these people. And they said, oh, it's an anti-colonial struggle. We're the new left. We're the SDS of Germany and the rest of it. And then, of course, where that ends up is people separating Jews on hijacked planes, and those people separating them are young Germans who have made a commitment to never allow Nazism back in their country. So they have become to the place where
Right.
they're
And
anti-colonial,
Entebbe, for example. Right.
in Tebe,
Right.
for instance, and that's complete. But the crazy thing is they don't change or don't nothing much changes when the Islamization, if I can, sort of destroy a word there, happens and the Marxist element of those movements disappears, and that I always find. But now today there's the war in Gaza, and as you pointed out, there's some things about it where you understand people's objection to it. You understand that people are in high dudgeon about, the disproportionate number of civilians who have died there versus Israeli civilians, et cetera. What do you say to people that were generally supportive of Israel after October 7th? And I'm thinking of a couple of people that I know in my life, I think you might even know them too, who have not changed their mind, but have become troubled by what has happened, let's say in the last year. And they see, some of these stories that we don't even know how accurate they are about people being killed, waiting, queuing up to get food. There has been a certain change that is, there are people that, of course, protested this war on October 8th. Kafia's in Times Square, ready to be on the other side of the Israelis. But that seems to have changed with a lot of people that I know who supported the Israelis and no longer do. What do you make of that and the kind of movement of people's opinion about the Israeli military offensive in Gaza?
My own experience has been that different people are having a very different experience and taking a very different path. So people who liked Israel but are just horrified at the Israeli war's effects on Gazan civilians. Those could be very, very mainstream, pro-Israel Jews, responding to Israeli government ministers from, for example, the far-right parties. This is a government that includes the most far-right party in Israel. I mean, there's Itamar Ben-Gvir, there is nobody to his right in Israeli politics. There's just no humans to his right. That's the
Yeah,
most absolute extreme edge.
Kahanas.
Doesn't mean
Yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah.
absolutely, and you might think he's great. I don't care. Like I think he's absolutely evil and terrible. Kahana is vile, and I mean proposed a bill in the Knesset. He was in the Knesset for one term, one time as a party of one. That's all he could ever get elected once. And he used that term to propose a bill to outlaw sex between Jew and non-Jew. And that's and Likud would not stay in the hall when he got the prime minister from Likud, from the right, would not stay in the hall when he got up to speak at the Knesset podium. That's actual apartheid. I mean, that is, under apartheid in South Africa, interracial sex was a felony. That's the
Mhm.
kind of stuff that Kahana wanted and talked about. Not just people deciding we're apartheid because they don't like us and they're deploying every word in the dictionary, but the actual thing. And Ben Gvir comes from that political world. So they're in the coalition. And they get up and freely allow themselves to say things. And Smotrich, the finance minister from not quite that far right, a different piece of Israeli society, but nevertheless very, very far right, especially on the Palestinian question. And they allow themselves to say things like, we got to empty Gaza, and to say it out loud on television. And then you have a horrifically bloody and awful campaign that is entirely urban warfare, trying to dig an enemy force that vows to carry out more massacres for all time out of a tunnel system that is the largest and most deeply entrenched tunnel system in the history of warfare by fivefold more than the second biggest tunnel system in the history of warfare. And civilians are paying a terrible cost. And an Israeli minister back home, right now, you can say, yeah, but look, in 2016, the American war against ISIS, together with the Iraqis, together with the Kurds, demolished Mosul, the city of Mosul, and had at least 10,000 dead civilians that anybody can count. And the official number was never released because the Iraqi government wanted to suppress any possibility that there would be a higher number. There's one British intelligence report that said it could have been 4 times that. That's the kind of war we're fighting. And the ISIS was much less entrenched in Mosul than Hamas is in Gaza. So you have this war that's going to be horrific and bloody. It's going to be. And by the way, Al Jazeera, for ideological reasons, had no interest in broadcasting the images out of Mosul in a way that everybody has an interest in broadcasting the images out of Gaza. And so every, super online young person in America today, who 50% of whom say they get their primary news source is TikTok, they live in one of the happiest, safest, most prosperous societies in the history of the world. But because they're so utterly online and their lives are so virtual and their mental worlds are so virtual, if the algorithm is being manipulated to fire hose into their brains images of horrific things that trigger the amygdala and stress responses constantly and produce these deep emotional responses on purpose, and it's the constant stream of their experience online, and they live nowhere else to the point of neglecting real social lives in the real world. In the case of double-digit percentages of them, and we have all this data on this, it's driving an epidemic of lung. They think they're in a war. They experience war. They're experiencing a virtual version manipulated for them by sometimes totally innocently by algorithms that are not trying to manipulate them, except to give them the things that they're already triggered by. And many, many times, in the case of TikTok, there are these studies where TikTok out favored Gazan war images
Mhm.
10 times or 5 times more than Instagram. TikTok also is susceptible to influence by the Chinese Communist Party because it's a company with databases that sit in China, as opposed to Instagram, which is an American company where the government doesn't influence how the algorithm works. Long story short, you have all these different groups that are responding in different ways for structural reasons to Gaza, and you actually have mass civilian suffering in Gaza, and you actually have an Israeli government that, for reasons of catastrophic, unforgivable incompetence, that betrayed the sacrifices of every soldier who went into Gaza thinking they're fighting Hamas so that kids in Israel can be safe in the future, decided to portray us in the most evil possible version that we could possibly be from the Israeli side. And a prime minister who, because he wants to hold on to these people as coalition partners and is terrified of losing an election after October 7, doesn't come out and say anything against these things that they're saying. All of these factors come together and produce all kinds of responses that I understand. I understand. There is a vicious, bigoted, genocidal campaign to destroy Israel with a massive propaganda component that is extremely well funded and is being pushed. And look, there are many more Muslims online than Jews online on account of how there are almost 2 billion Muslims in the world and very nearly 15 million Jews. We're working on that 16th million. And so, in any case, we're going to lose the algorithm, any algorithm that depends on popularity. But beyond just the numbers game, we're incompetent at this. And some of this was caused by our own leadership. And most people responding to Gaza are good, decent people influenced by this stuff. Right now, for example, there's the starvations question in Gaza, the hunger question, the aid question. For 20 months, we have been subject to a never-ending stream of claims that there is mass starvation in Gaza. And for 20 months, it has been a lie. It has simply been a lie. There was hunger in some small places temporarily in the middle of certain operations because of supply problems. There has not been mass hunger in Gaza for 20 months. It's simply not true. But now because we have finally shifted from an aid program that is run by the UN and run by these other agencies that Hamas was constantly using and leveraging and taking over in all kinds of complicated ways on the ground, in ways that gave it massive leverage in the civilian population and allowed it to create a massive black market that it profited off of and continued fighting because it had that resource. Now we've shifted to this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is this American-Israeli project to create an aid system that does not include Hamas. Now there might actually be hunger in Gaza because the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has their first initial rollout has not been great. It's been, they've given out millions of meals already, but they're 2 million people. And they have to do it much faster, much bigger, much more seriously. You're going to take aid out, away from the hands of Hamas. You better make sure nobody then starves to death, or you've made Hamas's own case.
Mm.
And that's a competence question. It would be a strategic disaster if this doesn't work, and it could be the thing that finally destroys Hamas if it does. How do I know that? Hamas has spent the 12 days of war, when everybody was paying attention to Iran, hunting down and killing dissidents in Gaza and uploading those videos to social media for Palestinians in Gaza to see, to understand that you don't dare work with the Humanitarian Foundation, with that secondary aid system, and that you don't dare challenge Hamas because it's not down, it can still find you.
Yeah,
So
and
Hamas is now in a campaign to do that. Yeah,
yeah,
and
and
that just
maybe,
doesn't make it into any of these videos, any of these algorithms, and nobody knows about it. So the Israelis are profoundly incompetent. I don't think they're evil, but I'm fighting against Israeli spokespeople in the government claiming that we're all evil because they're such utter incompetent. Now, Ben Gvir is actually, I think, racist, and so he's doing it like that's an authentic representation of his views, but it's not an authentic representation of the views of 90% of Israeli Jews. So anyway,
yeah,
I don't
no,
know. It's
those
all big and
videos
complicated.
that come out of Gaza of punishment videos do not make it into the TikTok and Instagram algorithms. And honestly, the difference was at the very beginning. I remember getting an invitation from the Israeli consulate to come watch videos. As you well know, Haviv, it was cut together the videos that were on GoPro cameras from terrorists coming and murdering people in their kibbutzim, and just utter horror and destruction. But you had to be somebody to get in there to watch it. It was not flooded out there in the way that it is on Instagram every day, making a point and actually, making the point that they wanted to make and turning the look. Today is Tuesday, June 24th. It is 195 degrees in New York City, and there is the Democratic primary for mayor of this city. And one of the big questions that has been asked during some of these mayoral debates is about Israel. And does Israel have a right to exist as a Jewish state, or as its critics say, an ethno state? We've seen this. And, one of the leading, probably the leading candidate, we'll find out in the next 24 hours. Just look up his Instagram post from October 8th. 2023, and you'll realize that the city with the largest Jewish population outside of Israel might soon elect somebody who doesn't hold Israel in very high esteem. I'm going to try to put
What
that
did he
as
write on October? What did
oh,
he
it
write on
was it
October?
was
I'm not going to go look it up because I don't
no, you
need that
don't
in
want
my
to look it up. It
life.
was it was something to the effect of, it was a both sides thing, but it even then was still more on the side of the Israelis created this situation and brought it upon themselves. But if Mamdani wins, I would recommend that you look it up because
The,
you'll.
the the tragedy is that Hamas destroyed Gaza and will continue to destroy Gaza and will never not destroy Gaza. You can't fix Gaza. You can't send concrete into Gaza. You can't send money into Gaza. There's no rebuilding of Gaza as long as Hamas is still in power in Gaza. And anybody who tells you otherwise, and anybody who thinks that protecting Hamas is protecting Gaza, keeps Gaza from ever coming out of this dark nightmare and into a new dawn. The Israelis can be pressured unless every single Israeli Jew, and polls tell us 90% feel this, unless every single Israeli Jew thinks Hamas will murder their kids if Hamas ever gets to come back. The government, you know, most Israelis have turned against the war, not because they think the government is fighting an extermination war, an evil war, a war that shouldn't be fought, not because they think because they think the government doesn't know how to defeat Hamas, because they think the government is incompetent and incapable of defeating Hamas. That is why most Israelis now, 70% something like that, want to end the war, but they don't want to lift the siege of Gaza. They don't want to rebuild Gaza. They don't want to hand Gaza back to Hamas. There is no future for Gaza as long as Hamas is in the way. And if you, Mamdani, or you, anybody else, thinks that you're supporting resistance by supporting Hamas, you are supporting theocratic tyrants who are going to continue to destroy Gaza going forward forever and ever, and never going to end the war against Israel, and never going to allow within Israeli politics and within the Israeli political psyche a window to open in which the Israeli public, which, what are you going to do? They still exist, they still get a say in what happens in the land, are going to be able to really imagine and tolerate a future where there's a Palestinian polity as long as Hamas takes control of that polity. So, these people are absolutely anti any kind of Palestinian future that's possible and good. And they do it basically for their own moral self-righteousness and preening and showing off that they're great warriors for a conflict that's totally virtual and just basically a morality play in their own heads and doesn't at all connect to what's actually happening on the ground.
I was just going to say, Mamdani, you said you hadn't seen his tweet from October 8th. I just want to read it to you quickly and ask you one final question. Haviv, thanks for sticking around. This is what he said on October 8th, 2023. I mourn the hundreds of people killed across Israel and Palestine in the last 36 hours. Netanyahu's declaration of war, the Israeli government's decision to cut electricity to Gaza, and Knesset members calling for another Nakba will undoubtedly lead to more violence and suffering in the days and weeks to come. The path towards a just and lasting peace can only begin by ending the occupation and dismantling apartheid. So that was the initial reaction of the person who might.
He couldn't even include Hamas's ideology or Hamas's declaration that it'll kill all the Jews
No,
in its own freaking charter. He couldn't include that in the. I
no.
mean, yeah, okay, go after some backbench MPs. Go after, even, I mean, some ministers of government who like to run in primaries all time, every day of the week. We just had 12 days of war in Iran, and the whole point, there was a hope in Israel that the Iranian people would rise up when we showed just how hollow the Iranian regime really was. And then a minister of government, Gila Gamliel, who just showed herself to be just a total idiot, comes out with a picture of herself with Reza Pahlavi, the
Yeah.
man the son of the Shah, who wants to be right now. The Shah was overthrown in 1978, beginning in 1978 and into 1979, by one of the most beautiful revolutions in the history of Iran. It turned into an Islamist revolution, but it started as this vast democratic coalition of liberals and feminists and Islamists and communists and almost every kind of Iranian, millions of people marching, half the population of Tehran got out to the streets to march against the oppressive regime of the man's father. So a lot of Iranians are not excited about the man. I don't know the numbers, I don't know the data, I don't care, but Israel's policy is not, we're going to defeat this regime, this Islamist regime that wants to destroy us and murder us and kill our kids in order to install the son of the former dictator who had a secret police that everybody was afraid of. Like,
No.
that's not the Israeli policy. But this idiot minister tweets this thing and it goes viral in Persian social media. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I
We are
mean,
both led by geniuses and morons. And
one
for
of the
some
greats,
reason,
one of the great bits of historical illiteracy that I saw in the past week was the rump American Communist Party, which I didn't even realize still existed, who put out a statement backing the Iranian regime against the imperialists, not realizing that in 1978, the Tudeh party, the Communist Party of Iran, was rounded up and imprisoned, and many of them executed after the Ayatollah.
thousands of them,
Yeah, thousands of them too.
thousands of them
So,
executed in prison in cold
yeah,
blood in their
yeah.
prison cells.
They just
Yeah.
immediately showed that the Savak had nothing on the new regime.
This is
Well,
a virulently anti-communist regime, violently
yeah,
so. So this guy is going to be mayor of New York City, and he can't even bring himself to look at
yeah.
Hamas and say, "Man, look, the Jews are bad." I mean, we all agree the Jews are bad. I mean, you've met Jews; they're bad, but also Hamas is not great. Like, he couldn't even bring himself to do that.
No,
I,
no. I
I'm
mean
very
that
disappointed.
that was the that's why I said I hesitate to both sides of them because it doesn't give one side much due at all. But we'll see. He might become the
Yeah.
next mayor, possible, but he is his showing in his placement is rather disconcerting. And as the reporting that I've seen, a number of American Jews in New York are lining up behind him. And
A friend of mine in Florida sent me a tweet by the former governor DeSantis. Is he the current governor? I'm sorry.
Florida,
This My expertise is not American
yeah,
politics, but DeSantis tweeted something like Mamdani shows that he's like catching up to Cuomo or even passing Cuomo in the polls, and then DeSantis tweets, "Man, housing prices in Palm Beach are going to just rise and rise and rise. Like all these people are not going to run away from New York." So
yeah.
look, I
That's what's
don't
going to
know.
happen. Yeah.
I wish that these ideologues saw us all as people. The Palestinians deserve a lot of sympathy. Hamas doesn't. And the Israelis, you want to come at the Israelis and criticize them? It'll be really helpful if Hamas isn't screaming in their other ear that it wants to murder their kids.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're good. That doesn't mean you should exonerate the Israelis of anything. But just think of everybody as people, and you stop being so utterly idiotically stupid. And that's what's frustrating about these ideologues. They're living out a fantasy. Mamdani doesn't know the Palestinian story. Even if he comes from the Middle East, he doesn't understand what they're going through. He's living out a morality play that he, by the way, picked up in the West. Most of the most radical thinkers and ideologues in the Middle East were radicalized in the West. From Sayyid Qutb was the
Yeah.
inspiration of Al Qaeda. He's radicalized in the United States. He wasn't radicalized there, and
In
that's something
Greeley,
that
Colorado,
comes.
as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Yeah, people leave Saudi Arabia, they leave Syria, they leave, Qatar, they leave the Emirates, they leave Egypt, they go to France, they go to New York, and in France and New York, they discover these radical ideologies, and they're basically Western ideologies with some thin veneer of some kind of Islamist language on top of them,
Well,
and it's dumb. It's
to your
just dumb.
point
I'm
there,
sorry.
Haviv, I just got one clarification. Mamdani is in Indian, his parents are Indians from Uganda. So I was
Okay, that's
presumably
actually interesting.
kicked out by Idi Amin in the early 1970s. But so here we are in Israel and the Middle East, where the Assad regime is gone and Hezbollah is destroyed. Iran has let's quote Osama bin Laden from 1998 and say Iran is a paper tiger, but a lot more to come. And there's nobody I like to talk to more about this stuff than Haviv Rettig. Follow Haviv's stuff at the Times of Israel, but the podcast Ask Haviv Anything. Don't take that literary. Do not. That's not a literal thing. Don't
Just
ask him about what pants to wear to a
no,
wedding. Ask him
very
about
important.
Israel because that's what he's very good at. Haviv,
I
thank
got to
you
rebrand.
so much for joining us, and I'll be coming back to you when we have further questions.
Thanks so much, Michael. It was fun.
All right, for the rest of you out there, we're going to do something we've been doing a little bit now, going out to the two-way community and doing something that we just said you shouldn't do to Haviv. We have an AMA, Ask Moynihan Anything. And that literally means anything because Haviv's an expert in the Middle East. I am very, very wide and very, very shallow. So ask me anything. And here is somebody from the two-way community asking me a question in our latest AMA. We have Jen. Good gender divide
Hi,
here today. Hi, Jen. How are you?
I'm good.
I think the
I'm,
aliens are real. You appear to be in space.
oh, that's right. I was
Look at that.
inspired by the there.
Yes.
So I have a little bit of a lightning round for you. I have
Okay.
10 either or, like your preference,
All
this
right.
or that.
It sounds long, but my answers tend to be a lot longer than 10 lightning round questions. So go ahead. I'll see if I can manage it.
Coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee. Yeah.
Okay. Beer or liquor?
Liquor. Always.
Okay. Hamburger or chicken tenders?
A hamburger. You can take the bun off. You can't take the. I'm a diabetic, so that's a
Oh, okay.
factor.
All right.
Yeah.
Fast food or fine dining?
Well, come on. I don't fine dining. I mean, I love fast food. I don't want to. I know it's an either or, but my daughter likes Taco Bell, and it's fucking amazing. Have you had this stuff? It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's so good, and it's really makes my stomach hurt. But yeah, fine dining I think is probably the obvious one there.
Heavy metal or pop rock?
Uh, Pop is too big of a category. I guess metal's pretty
Well,
big
maybe
too.
like a soft rock, Eagles,
Oh,
you
not
know.
if I could never hear the Eagles again, I'd be the happiest person on earth. I mean, all those people should be in jail. Is Glenn Fry, was he in the Eagles? Straight to jail. Yeah, he's absolutely the worst. In metal, I grew up, my first obsession when I was a kid, was my older brother being like him, and he was like a hair metal guy. So I had like every record. I had Rat records. I mean, one of the first concerts I saw was Rat and Poison open for them. So yeah, so I'll go for metal.
British humor or American humor?
I mean, depends in the sense that Americans, one of the great American art forms is stand-up. Brits don't do it as well as Americans. Television comedy, British. So yeah, stand-up Americans, television comedy, British in a lot of ways.
So here's kind of a little sketch humor kind of thing. Old SNL or Monty Python?
Old SNL, actually. I went back and watched Monty Python, and some of it was great, and some of it, I used to love every sketch. Some of it doesn't hold up, but in a lot of old SNL stuff doesn't either. But yeah, SNL.
You prefer sarcasm or dry humor?
I mean, I don't even know how to speak if it's not sarcastic.
Okay.
That's the only language I know. Yeah, I don't even speak English.
Coffee shop or diner?
Diner. Diner is my greatest lament about New York is the disappearance of a diner. And I'm going to tell you something that happened today. I went into the city to help somebody out. Somebody left something, and I said, in the morning, and it was a pain in the ass place in the city to get to. The reason I went, because I'm a good person.
No, there was a diner.
There was a diner close by. 2 diners, as a matter of fact, and they're very rare in the city these days. Diners in the past, and I'm not a nostalgic person about this stuff. I would get the newspapers, the New York Post was always 25 cents back in those warring days. The New York Sun when it was out, the New York Times and the Journal, and I would go to the diner, and the coffee never ended, and I would sit and read the paper all day. It was great. It's fantastic.
Okay, do you prefer a long book or a short book for reading?
I'm about 400 pages into an 1,100 page book now, which every time it sucks because I like the print version, but I can't bring it on the subway because it's like wearing a pack through Afghanistan or something. It's too much. But it depends. And then again, I mean, there's a lot of great short books, a lot of great long books. But I would say my favorite books are probably over 200, 300 pages. Yeah, probably.
Well, okay, here's just a bonus question. Just for pleasure, are you fact or fiction?
It depends on what period of my life. Right now, I'm back into fact. I'm back into reading nonfiction. I have fiction moments. In the summer is obviously good for fiction. And so my summer holiday will be, I've made a promise to the person. I go with a bunch of people to this one place, and it's in Italy, and it's my friend rents the place, and he's British, and we always talk about the great British novel, which answers 2 of your questions, because it's 3 parts, and it is the Evelyn Waugh Sword of Honor trilogy, which is written about the Second World War and around the time of the Second World War. But it starts, the character's called Guy Crouchback. I'm going to reread this. It starts in Italy, and there's an Italian connection. So that will be the book that I will read this summer. And it's so that's fiction. So there you go.
Yeah.
Man, that was a good list. I appreciate it. Do you need any advice for anything, or you just
would reveal things about you?
Did that reveal anything about me? I don't know.
Well, a bit about kind of like maybe how your mind works and with humor and what you like and your food stuff. So I don't know.
There you go. Well, thank you very much. I'm trying to learn more things about myself too. That's what my therapist says I should do. But I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
All right, thank you for joining us, and please make sure you're subscribed to us here on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. or whenever you feel like it on YouTube, Spotify, all other podcast platforms. Subscribe, do all that stuff. But we will be back soon with another phenomenal show. See you soon.